Now for the actual part of the show. So this is Colonel Retired Hank Hoffman. He is from the class of 1963. He is a Vietnam veteran and a master pilot. He had over 10,000 flying hours in the military, about 3 times what the average pilot gets. He instructed in bombers, fighters, tankers, trainers, transports, and gliders in the Air Force, which is a feat that's virtually impossible today. He has 377 combat strike missions on 4 different combat tours as a graduate of the United States Air Force Test Pilot School and has flown past Mach 2 at 80,000 feet. He's also qualified as a captain in airlines and helicopters, and he has a total of over 18,000 hours flying as a part of the acrobatic team at USAFA. And he often says flying is better than actually working. He wants to be remembered as a warrior. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Colonel Hank Hoffman.
Good afternoon. I am just delighted to be here. I've been waiting for 40 years for somebody to ask me what happened in Vietnam, and you guys get to hear it. We're going to talk about my personal experiences a little bit, and I'm going to put some history dates in there, highlights and lowlights. But we're going to start with the inoperative machine. We're going to start back in 1962. This is my room at the Academy. It looks just like a group of you guys, with a couple of exceptions. Cigarette and no women. In this group of 17 random people that happen to be out in the hallway and rushed in here to get the picture taken, we have this list on the left. 1 POW, 1 KIA, 1 guy washed back, 1 guy thrown out, 5 retired colonels, 6 retired lieutenant colonels, a couple of majors. Only 2 guys did the 5 and dive, although back then we had to do 6 and dive. 1 medical discharge, 2 test pilots. This handsome stud in the middle, that's me. Not in the picture, both of our squadron commanders drowned in the North Atlantic in aircraft accidents. One is a second lieutenant, one is a lieutenant colonel. And the other guys that aren't in the picture that could have been, Ron Fogelman. You remember that name? First Air Force Academy grad who was chief of staff. He lived down the hall. Bart Holliday. Bart Holliday is the Holliday Athletic Center. And he donated $5 million to get his name on that. So we had some successful and some unsuccessful people. Bart's not there, but his roommate's there. Who's that? Lance Seijon. So we got a Medal of Honor winner in there too. And we had no idea what was going on. Guy Gruters is not in there. Guy Gruters had, I think, the worst job you could have in the Air Force. He got to hold Lance while he was dying in the POW camp. You can't tell what's ahead for you there. Von Moltke the Elder's not in that picture either, mainly because he died in 1899. But he has a quotation that I think applies here. He said the best battle plan is no good after the first contact with the enemy. So as soon as we went to war, all of our grand plans were just kind of gone. Okay, when I graduated from pilot training in 1964, we were in the middle of the Cold War. And the Cold War had this mutually assured destruction business associated with it. What that meant was we were going to bomb the Soviet Union with nuclear bombs, and basically most of the airplanes would drop their bomb and run out of gas and bail out, hopefully on the other side of the radioactive cloud that you've just given them. The fighters, the F-100s and the F-105s, they were based in Europe, and they were going to deliver their nuclear bomb and bail out in enemy territory, hopefully outside the radioactive cloud. The interceptors, the F-104s, the F-102s, they were going to take off and go supersonic to intercept the enemy bombers coming in. Hopefully they were all packed together nice and tight for us. And they were going to shoot at them, probably take one pass and run out of gas. And they were going to bail out over northern Canada, so that was a better deal there. You'll notice the acronym for mutually assured destruction. It was a mad policy, and I'm happy that we never did turn the planet into a ball of radioactive gas. So we went from mad to the domino theory. The domino theory, you may remember, was in Eastern Europe. The Soviet Union was annexing countries like they were going out of style. They would fall one after the other like dominoes. And that theory was being applied to Southeast Asia. And when we opened here in 1964, President Kennedy had decided that that had gone far enough, and he was going to try to stop the dominoes falling right there. So we went to a hot war. The Gulf of Tonkin incident there on 5 August is generally considered the start of the Vietnam War, although we had people over there from 1955. Who's Val Bork? First cadet to enter the Air Force Academy, the first one killed in action. You can see that he didn't last very long after the Gulf of Tonkin incident. So we were not prepared for this war in the jungle. We were in the business of delivering nuclear bombs and trying to survive afterward. We didn't really have a close air support capability. The close air support we did have was the A-1, which was excellent at the job. It was brand new in 1946. It was a big propeller, single-engine propeller airplane, and the Air Force wanted nothing but jets. Can't do it. So I didn't do very well at pilot training, and while I had some selections, some choices, I really wanted to be a warrior, and I ended up in the B-52. B-52 went to war. Everybody wanted to. No, that's not right. All of the airplanes that flew, all of the warbirds we had wanted to participate in the only war we had. So the B-52s wanted to drop bombs. The F-104s were over there. So were the F-106s. They had no business being there because they really didn't have a mission. But and they were misusing the B-52 there as well. 15th of June in '65, they put together 30 B-52F models out of Guam, and they had planned this for months, and that'll tell you the kind of intel they were working with. The target information was months old, and God only knows who was in that target box by the time they got there. The first 30, they ran that just like they did in World War II. They had the same call signs. Red 1 was the first airplane of the day. they did it radio silent so that they wouldn't know we were coming, in spite of the fact that it was going to take us 6 hours to get there. And so on that first flight, the first thing they did was run 2 airplanes together and lose them with all hands. Another one aborted because of an electrical failure and landed at Clark in the Philippines. Their target box was kind of large. It was 1 mile by 2 miles. And the idea is to get all your bombs in there. And they got almost half of the bombs in that target. It was a disaster. Somebody should have known that SAC wasn't very sharp at that point. SAC, of course, is Strategic Air Command. The B-52, on the other hand, was a magnificent weapon. It carried 108 bombs, and if you drug that through the jungle, say you could do a mile string, you could do a 2-mile string, however much you wanted. When you looked at it from above, it looked like a plow had gone through there and just tore them up. On the other hand, if you're using it for interdiction like we were, you drop a 500-pound bomb on a dirt trail, what does it do? It moves the dirt around. And they had a half a dozen coolies and straw hats come out with a shovel afterward, and the trail was back in business in an hour. Now, if you happen to hit a truck that was parked on the trail, that was bad news. But it was kind of random and in my opinion, a waste of resources. But looking at that picture there, you see all those bombs coming out. I flew both bombers and fighters in the Great War there. My fighter unit, they showed a movie, short clips like your commander just did. And they showed a picture of the B-52 dropping bombs. And of course, you show it to a fighter pilot, and the first thing he says is, "Oh!" And the bombs would come out, and then wisecracks rolled for a while, and then they kind of ran out of breath. And the bombs were still coming out of that airplane. And it got silent, and then the volume came up again, and people were saying, "Geez, look at all those bombs." It was a nasty weapon, but it was misused in the jungle. See if I can get one. So I finally got 100 missions over there. Had 3 tours in B-52. We flew out of Guam, Okinawa, and Utah, Thailand. If you flew out of Guam, you were going to fly for 12 hours. Just 2 pilots. Well, I had a crew of 6, but just 2 people that had to stay awake to make sure you landed. If you flew out of Okinawa, you were going to fly about 8 hours. And if you flew out of Powell, it was a 4-hour mission, and you didn't even have to refuel. That was a good deal. Flying bombers was like 3rd grade. It was long and hard and boring, and you didn't get a lot of credit for it. But it did a pretty good job when it was done. Now, I put Palace Chase up there. Palace Chase was a program where they were running out of fighter pilots because the policy was, we'll give you 100 missions and then you're going home. And as they ran out of fighter pilots, the Pentagon, of course, was called the Puzzle Palace. And they raided the Pentagon for all those guys on the desks who were wearing wings and hadn't flown since Jesus knew when. And they brought them out, and mostly what they did with them was they put them in my unit and made them my aircraft commander. And I spent 5 years as a miserable, lonely co-pilot a long way from home. And after that 5 years was up, I walked into the boss and I gave him a cardinal. He said, "Screw you guys, I'm out here." And the wing commander caught me the next day and he said, you remember that fighter that you applied for 5 years ago? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, it just came in, but you got to take your papers out. And I said, okay, and decided to stay a little longer. And he promised me an F4, but I ended up getting an A37, which I was just delighted to have, by the way. The A37 was built during the war to cover that loss of close air support that we didn't have. If you take a fighter that cruises at Mach 2 and you try to compute the cornering speed on it, you guys have all done cornering speed and aero, right? I don't see any heads going up and down. There's one, okay. What you need to have to get close to the target to bomb something is a low cornering speed, which was why the A1 was good. In order to get to its bomb release speed of 250 knots, not only did he have to dive at the target, he had to push the throttle up. So if you're bombing at 420 knots like the F4 does, you're releasing your bombs 6,000 feet above the ground, which means you can just barely see the target 2 miles away. The A-37, we could bomb at 2,500 feet, and even though they manned these A-37s with leftovers, these guys here, I got 5 first lieutenants, 4 majors who were going to be advisors to the Vietnamese, 2 captains over here who were bomber co-pilots. The Air Force didn't really care that they were putting their best people in that airplane to hurt the enemy because they didn't care for the close air support mission. It was an Army mission, and all they wanted to do was go supersonic and look good. Okay. There's a plaque down here on the Heritage Trail. 3 Academy grads were killed in the A-37. And let's go on to the next one here. Protesters, fake news, and free love. That's what the 60s and 70s were going on. And I was all right with the free love part. Didn't see that much of it. Well, I was in Vietnam most of the time. The fake news was as bad as it is now. I can recall, you may have heard about this monk who immolated himself, poured gasoline on himself and lit it on fire in protest for the Americans being there in Vietnam. Well, there was another monk who lit himself on fire in protest over the communists. But that didn't make the paper anywhere, nowhere at all. So you were being told what brutal people we were, and they had the My Lai massacre thing going, and you weren't being told how bad the Viet Cong were. It was really disappointing if you actually had some idea what was happening. They had fake news on the other side. In the A-37, I put a bomb in a cave mouth, target hole about the size of a garage door, and the guy gave me credit for 100 killed by air, 100 men killed, and there's no way he knew there was 100 guys in that cave. It was fake news. All right, back to the war protesters. This poster was on the bar in Vietnam when I got there. It's paid for. Down here it says, proceeds from the sale of this poster go to the draft resistance. So here I am in Vietnam, and I'm paying for people to not have to go to war. folk singer Joan Baez and her sisters posed for this, and I thought it was truly funny. Not so funny in the airport between my third and fourth tour. Back in those days when you traveled, you had to wear a uniform. And I'm getting on board an airplane, and just as we get in the airplane, this little girl in front of me turns around and spits on me. And I was kind of surprised, to say the least. She thought she was protesting the war, I guess, but in fact she was insulting me, but she picked the right spot because before I get the chance to bitch slap her, the flight attendants grabbed the two of us and they hustled her into the back, and I got rewarded. I got to sit in first class, and I had a free beer. Going home, I was about to extend. Oh, you know what? Maybe I can make this thing go back here a little bit. This kid here in the middle, Lieutenant Jim Harris, is the only guy in that picture that didn't make it home. Jim made it all the way to 1 week before he was supposed to rotate. He went out on a night mission and he just didn't come back. That's the way we lost them in the Air Force. And the guys didn't bleed out on you in your arms, which is a pretty good deal, really. I always said the Army could take the rape and pillage. I wanted the clean sheets and the air conditioning. But he just went out on a night mission and didn't come back. He impacted the ground on the downwind of the bomb run somewhere. And it occurred to me about this time that the president, who was Johnson at that time, didn't really give a shit about winning this war. And the only thing that was going to happen is I was going to extend for a month and try and get to 400 missions. There was no point in that. The only thing that could happen was I could get killed. It wouldn't make any difference to the war at all. And so they managed to demotivate me at that point. That list of numbers there, that's the cost of war, the sacrifice of war, if you will. 7 of my flying buddies in the squadron, in the various squadrons I was in over there, didn't come back. 18 classmates. Of the names on the War Memorial plaque you have, most of them are from Vietnam, 151 from Vietnam. There's only about 200 names on that plaque, 210. My memories of combat, I guess it would, perhaps it had something to do with where we were flying from, but it seemed like I was always sweaty. And my flight suit weighed an extra 2 pounds just because it was wet. It was intense. Combat was intense. I've had the thought that perhaps we felt more alive being so close to death. There was a coating of testosterone on everything. We played rough games in the bar. We sang incredibly filthy songs, and all, I suppose, as a bravado to admit that we were really scared. So this is an excellent book here, The 11 Days of Christmas. It talks about how President Nixon finally decided to bomb Hanoi with a B-52. And we could have done this 5 or 6 years earlier, by the way, but they were dragging the war out because they didn't understand about it. Okay, so we bombed them 11 nights. We bombed up there. It says days, but they only bombed a night because they did it just like World War II. after the 11 days were over, we lost 15 airplanes, 15 B-52s, but we didn't lose any on the last night because the pilots at Powell were in revolt, and they said, we're doing this stupidly, and we want to plan the mission differently, and they allowed them to plan their own mission on the last night, and they didn't lose men. That's a long story. I'd love to tell you that, but you can read it in the book if you want. So 3 months later, we got the POWs back. A few months after that, a year and a half after that, President Nixon resigned, and the Congress and the U.S. in general quit supporting the South Vietnamese, and a year and a half after that, the fall of Saigon. I remember the fall of Saigon very well. I got really, really drunk, and it didn't solve anything at all. I put Clausewitz in here, his definition of victory. The idea is you've won when you've taken away the enemy's will to resist. And the protesters had taken away our will to continue. And so Saigon fell, and it was all over. In summary, this book here is excellent, Nixon's book. I met Dick Nixon once. I was flying as airplane captain from New York to Miami, and he was back in first class. And I so respected him for getting us out of Vietnam and getting our POWs back that I went back and I asked for his autograph. I don't know if you've ever asked anybody for their autograph, and that's the first and only guy I ever asked. But all of a sudden he's writing, and there's this empty moment, and my mouth opened, and out of it came, I used to work for you. And he said, oh yeah, where was that? I said, well, Vietnam mostly. And he gave me what I think is the finest 10-word, 9-word summary of Vietnam that you'll ever hear. He said it ended poorly, but we needed to be there. In this book is I call it a blueprint for the first Gulf War. Clearly, Bush 1 read it, and he figured out what he wanted to do in Iraq. When we went big time, and then we went home. And the whole war lasted 100 hours. He learned something from that. Now, General Powell later codified what's in Nixon's book into the Powell doctrine, which I don't know if you study it or not, but you should. Because since civilians always control the military, there's a very real chance that in 25 or 30 years, one of you guys is going to be chief of staff when some president whose experience with war is as a community organizer decides to invade shithole Stan because he's annoyed with them. And I want to charge you with going into the guy who doesn't know anything about war and explaining these three things to him, or the Powell doctrine. But you tell him, don't go unless you know exactly what you want to do. And if you go, bring everybody. Don't increase the pressure gradually. All that does is increase the resistance gradually. Another thing you need to tell the president is about the rules of engagement. The rules of engagement are just vital to how you prosecute the war. My fighter pilot buddies would tell me they'd see him building a SAM site, and we had to leave it alone until it was operational. I don't know who that makes sense to. Well, let's leave that one alone. So let's go back to the airport. In, I don't know, late 80s or 90s, I was captain again, and I'm bringing the load from Dallas to El Paso, and it's a bunch of GIs dressed in fatigues just like you guys. And I get this message up in the cockpit that says they've got a reception plan for them. Please tell the flight attendants to let the military guys off first. And so I did that, and I did my usual thing. I stood in the cockpit door, and of course nobody wanted to talk to me. They had, Mama was waiting for them just up the hallway. And so these guys are turning left and disappearing. And after a little bit of that, I decided, well, I'm not a civilian. These civilians can follow me. I made the rule. I'm going up there because I've got work to do. So I followed these guys. I was maybe 10 or 15 in line. I followed them up the jet bridge, and about the time I was 15, 20 feet away from the jet bridge, the band started. They got a band in the arrival room, and the people started cheering, and I was weeping. I can't hardly tell that story. The point was, after it took me a long time to figure it out, we never really got closure from that war. And when I got involved into the band for those guys coming home, it made me feel, well, emotional. So when people tell me thanks for your service, and they still do, I generally, if I have a chance to talk to them, I'll say, I would rather hear welcome home. All right, that's my speech. I've got a list of recommended reading there, which I'll talk just a little bit about. These two, you like the t-shirt? Yeah. Anyway, these two here are about medal of honor letters, Cy John and Bud Day. And if you read those, they'll tear your heart out. These two down here are written by Vietnamese. You'll recognize the guy on the bottom as a North Vietnamese. This pussy and that cat are actually the same place. Elaine Shepard was a war correspondent who had a very interesting view of the war. All right, where's Meg? I will take questions, or you can dismiss them. I don't know how much time we've got.
Got some time, sir. First, give Colonel Hoffman a round of applause. We've got about 5 or 10 minutes for questions, so please feel free. As you know, he's not going to hide you from the truth.
Oh, I forgot. I was going to join you at HAPS this evening if I get a chance.
Also, Colonel Hoffman is the unofficial adopted grandfather of Group 1 now.
All right, who takes issue with what I said? Who's got something? Yes, sir.
I got a question for you, sir. What was your most harrowing moment when you were flying those 827?
Well, my most harrowing moment, I screwed up. You remember we were talking about cornering speed in the fighter, and I was supposed to deliver napalm, but the fax said, can you strafe with the napalm on board? And I gave them the old, I guess. And I pressed the target with a full load of bombs on board, and then they ran the thing into the water. I'd been strafing this little boat, and it had a mast sticking up, and I can recall it was moving back and forth a little bit. And I finished strafing, and I pulled like a son of a bitch, and the nose rotated, and it just kept going. And I said, oh my God, I'm going to hit the mast. And pretty soon it went past, and I said, well, that was good, and now I'm looking at hitting the water. And I got down into ground effect. This is ground effect is stuff you should know from Aero. About the time I got into ground effect, it decided it would fly. And so closest I came to dying was my own stupidity then, and chasing the ski-wee nurse into town.
We're gonna have some fun at half, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, if you could go back and teach Lieutenant Hoffman one lesson, what would it be?
Oh, God. Keep your mouth shut. I was generally my own worst enemy, so I don't know that there's anything viable in that. I wonder if we can go back to my first slide. Well, never mind. Hey, no, now next, there you go. Some of the guys in that picture, we're talking about the guy who was out on an honor violation. You would say that he was a failure, but I know him. He's a good friend of mine. He's a respected attorney in Denver, and he's still a good man. There were some other failures in there. Oh, I got passed over for lieutenant colonel 3 times, but I still got promoted to full colonel. And you don't do that by giving up. The guy that watched back a year, he retired as a full colonel. He was just a wonderful officer. Some of us started a little slow. I was truly mediocre at pilot training, but I was pretty good by the time I got out of test pilot school. And, keep learning. Best I can do.
Thanks, sir.
Anybody? Yes?
Given the lengths of the war in the media, they often compare Vietnam and Afghanistan. Would you say that that's fair, or what would you say is the big differences in your opinion?
Tell me the first part of the question again.
I said the media likes to compare Vietnam and the war in Afghanistan, given the length of the conflicts. What would you say about that?
I would say that it's a valid comparison. The thing is, we didn't really know what we wanted in Afghanistan. We started that because of 9/11, I think. And after we punished them, we should have gone home because there was no valid purpose in staying there. Vietnam is kind of different because of the domino theory thing. And basically what we were trying to do was prevent that particular domino from falling, which it finally did, but it fell late enough to where the whole Southeast Asia didn't go communist. And it gave us time, it gave Reagan time to bankrupt the Soviet Union, which changed everything.